そういうの。 Okay, hello everyone. As always, how's the sound? Hello. Hello, Chris Davis. Hello, Will Kablam. Very good. Okay, so I'll start here. Um, let's see. So it's Ichiriki with the white stones and Shin Jinseo with the black stones. And right now, they're fighting in the center of the board. And Ichiriki is probably going to play some move towards the center. So I'm expecting something like this. And then black will have to live in the center. Um, very good. Hello, everyone. Okay, so black, yeah. Well, Shin Jinseo is probably going to find a good way to do that. I would suggest, for instance, something like this. Something like this. Black can make a little space there and should be able to live. Um, Shin Jinseo might find a better way to do it, but something like that. And the fight will continue. Um, there's to look at territory, there's not very much. There's a white territory in the upper right, a black territory in the lower left. They sort of rule out. Then there's a small white territory in the upper left corner, and a small black territory probably on the left side. So they both have small territories, and the center of the board is open. Black has some stones towards the lower right area, but white's probably going to have an opportunity to invade there, and that's going to be mixed up also. So very little territory. This kind of fighting game is it's pretty much Ichiriki's style. So I'd say he's probably feeling good about that. And of course, Shin Jinseo will play just about any type of game. So he does a lot of research, I believe, in the opening, and he plays openings very close to what AIs recommend. And then he's just good about uh, regardless of the type of game, he's good in the middle game and towards the end game, especially the end game. So he gets stronger as the game proceeds, you might say. Okay, so very good. So I'll go back to the beginning here. Oh, let's just take a look at a quick look at the game yesterday. Last yesterday, um, I was finishing my live stream, and someone said that Shin Minjung was losing his game, and I forget. Well, a number of people were saying that, and that it had turned around, and I found that hard to believe because earlier in the game, Shin Minjung had a secure lead, and he was going to finish it off, and I found it hard to believe that he could lose such a game, and it was sort of interesting because it looked a bit like a click misclick, that is, um, but maybe it wasn't. So we don't really know. It's a position like this. At any point, if Black had played this exchange, which is a forcing exchange, there would have been no problem. He would have gone ahead to win the game. So what happened, and basically in this case, if White plays here later, Black will play here, and the issue is whether or not Black's group in the center is alive or not. So when White does stuff like this to try to kill it, White would play like this. And if we look at the left half of that group, it's going to be a ko. But the problem for White is that Black has this cut here. For one thing, Black has this. So Black has the cut here. And it's this horrible ko for White, in which White's going to lose so much. It's just not possible for White to play this, because all of these stones here that White has in the lower half of the board, they're all going to be dead when White loses this ko. So it's completely out of the question. So this would have been a safe way to win the game. In the actual game, Black failed to play this move before White came, so it's too late to do it now. And he played here. So this looked like he had misplaced the stone. Looks like a misclick because obviously, you might think black has to play here. And the problem with this move, so it could have been a misclick because black had to play here after all. So he had to play here, but there's an issue with this is that in this variation, when white takes away black's eyes, this time white is all connected up. So white can play here and here. Here that is. If black plays here, it's dead. Well, yeah, it's dead. So white plays here, it's dead. All of white's stones are connected up. White does have to prepare by playing. At some point, white has to play the target here, of course. Yeah. So that's implied that white's played that, and then here, and it's all connected up. So black is dead, and this would be actually, it would be a ko. So black can play here, threatening to make an eye in the center of the board. So this would make an eye here, and so white plays here. This becomes a forcing move. If white peeps, black can play the quarrel here, and that threatens to capture 3 white stones, and black can squeeze like this. So this makes a life on the side, and that would be alive. So what white does is white covers here. Black has a hanging connection. Probably play this, and then here. So it's going to be this ko, and black's probably winning anyway, even though it's a ko. And on some of this stuff in the center, like black 13 and 14, black wouldn't play the whole sequence. So black would stop there and would not play this exchange, but would just do this immediately. So black should be okay. Black probably has enough ko threats to handle this. White doesn't really have a lot of ko threats in this game. So he was okay, but it was kind of, it's not alive without the ko. So maybe he worried about that, or maybe he misclicked. I don't really know. But in the game, it was like this. White just got to pick off that one black stone, and that was really big. And this, right, yeah, he said in an interview that he was worried about the life of the black group. I'm not surprised. It was probably at the last stages of the game. He could have been short of time also. So yeah, it makes sense. So this was a pity. It was a fairly, it would have been a lot simpler if at some point he had played this exchange here. So if he had played this exchange, it would have made life a lot easier for himself, just because he can answer here. And he, in order to kill the black group, white has to be ready for a ko here. This ko would be, not only would it be painful, but it's actually, if we count the ko that black has on the left side, it's going to be a double ko. So it's not even really a ko. So that was unexpected loss by Shin Minju, and Yan Jingxing was the winner in this game. So 3 Chinese players made it to the semifinals so far, and we have this game between Japan and Korea. Let's get back to the main game here. Okay, so this is the expected move that Ichiriki has played, and so both Japan and Korea only have 1 player left. So the winner of this game is the one who gets the semifinal. One of the 2 countries is going to be knocked out here. So let's go back to the beginning of the game. Okay, 3 point, yeah. It's the way they play now. This is the point where white did have a choice between this Joseki, probably a choice between this one and this one. So it's this way. It's Shin Minjo's. I'm Shin Jinseo. He's gonna play this way. So that could have happened, but when the ladder favors black, it's a very common move to play here. And if white pushes through and cuts, the ladder favors black. So it's important that the ladder favors black when black plays this way. And this is an unusual way for white to play. Usually white would sort of play away, but um, it's a good point. So for instance, even if white, let's see, this is the order they did it. If white had started with this side, and if black had continued with this move, it's perfectly conceivable that white would want to play here anyway. So that's okay. So it's probably not all that unusual. And let's see. Yeah, he immediately invaded. So this is a very, it was a wide extension. So I expect if white had come any closer to the wall, then black would have invaded on the other side. So this is a position, the miniature Chinese, the mini Chinese, you might say, where quite often you see this move. So maybe he was going to play here. Actually, you could play this one also. That one actually works also. They're both done by computer programs. But this is the one that was famous because it was so different from what we did before. So black invades. Okay, Decision Scientist is asking the G18 move. Okay, let's answer that question first. Rick Rubenstein is asking about the G18 move. Black basically should do something because white's about to capture the one black stone. So if black plays away, pushing through here to capture the one stone, this is pretty big. It's the marked white stone, the triangle. It's in a pretty. It's not in the best place, but it's still in a fairly good place. And capturing that stone it's a big thing. So that's the reason there. Otherwise, black could have played here. This would have been fairly reasonable. But I don't see that very much, and it probably gets a slightly worse score from the computer. So that's why everyone is playing here now. It's the natural. It looks pretty natural to me. It looks like a normal shape. So Decision Scientist was asking, and no, it's not the Kosumi here is not a AI invention. It's a pretty normal shape that professionals would tend to play there in most cases. There are some similar shapes where it does show up. And the Decision Scientist was asking me to assess the Joseki here. It's about even. It's as far as I can tell, it's an even result. Where white plays towards the center. It's okay to play a star point, but if you play a star point, you have to expect that some people will dive into the 3-3 point. It's become very popular now. And this is a very natural way for that Joseki to progress. So if you don't like this, white would have to avoid that by playing the knight's move. But this is just a different problem, and they're all equal. I mean, they're about even. This one, in this case, white would probably play somewhere around here, anyway. And it's hard to choose a good point on the sides. Wherever white plays, there's going to be there still will be invasion points. So it's about even. I'd say it's there's a number of choices, and it's hard to say which is the best. Right? White could have chosen a different sequence than the Kema. So for instance, if white plays here immediately, we could go back to this and say black plays here. Then in this case, maybe white could push. Or even with the first move, white could have pushed here. And if black extends, we get into this variation, in which case white can cut on this side. Why can white cut on this side? The reason for that is that if white does it at first, black's going to get a Ponnuki. This is good shape for black. Even if I don't know about 8, sometimes black can play away, but 8 is a pretty big move. And if we look at the corner here, black does have a forcing move towards here. And so it's a good shape for black to have this Ponnuki. Whereas if white pushes first, so now white can cut on this side, and if black captures the one stone, that exchange of 1 for 2 is a huge advantage for white. So this is just good for white. And it means black will answer 5 on this side. So it's a slight plus for white to be able to cut here, and that black cannot capture the cutting stone. And white continues with this. And this joseki, this is also a joseki, in which case black is really low on the side. And so we used to think this was bad for black. But I think there's an issue for white in that white's wall, and it's not as strong as it looks. It's just a string of stones facing in the center. You have to reinforce it. So white would probably immediately play here towards the side. I would play fairly close to the wall in this case, because this wall, it doesn't have flexibility, it doesn't have eyes, it doesn't have the resilience that in most cases white has with this being a forcing move. It's not going to be a forcing move anymore in this variation of the joseki, where black is so solid in the corner. So sometimes it's going to be forcing, but not always. It's just a very much stronger shape that black has in the corner. It means that white's wall on that side is relatively weak. So I wouldn't be playing white extensions myself in this case, and I would be playing fairly close to the wall. One of these two probably. And white would still have to sort of keep that in mind, the fact that white doesn't have any eyes later in the game when black plays 12, and will still be thinking of going inside. Yes. That's Rory Mitchell saying he remembers, Rory Mitchell remembers how AlphaGo attacked the walls and showed how weak they can be. So indeed, that was one of the big surprises, you might say, when AlphaGo played 60 games against top professionals on the internet. And in some of those games, it did play the early 3-3 point, and we were really surprised by that. And then it attacked the wall. So it was working so well. So it's an example of a wall that can be not very strong. And if we look at the game wall, it's actually a bit more strong, because now when white, did white do it yet? No. But when white plays moves like this, now this is pretty much forcing, because if black doesn't answer it, this is again threatening to capture a stone. It makes a difference in black's eye space. So following up moves like this will be forcing too, just because it's going to be so painful when white covers here, and it's going to be sente, and black's going to have to live with 2 eyes and stuff like that. So there's a lot of extra potential there. And of course, white's going to have, when black plays here, white's still going to have the ko here, which again is going to be big if white wins it. So there's if white has a ko threat, there's a good possibility black's going to end up connecting here. So just because of this, the wall is much more strong than the wall in that other variation I was talking about. So that's the pro of playing loosely like this. And it does give black a bit more room towards the lower side. So there's strengths and weaknesses to it. And overall, they're pretty much equal. It's hard to say which is the better variation. So with this move, you usually say you attack with the keima. That's the knight's move. So the usual attack would be playing here, but he didn't do that. So he's more worried about that territory on this side, about a black invasion there in some cases maybe. So he's playing a bit tightly here. And then he plays this, and he gets on top. So yeah, this kind of play for black, this move, it jumped out at me. Okay, when is it better to reinforce a wall by jumping on the 3rd line and when on the 4th line? Roman G. When is it better to reinforce a wall? Oh, so maybe we're talking about this black extension here. So comparing an extension on the 3rd line with one on the 4th line. So from black's point of view, at least. That's really difficult to say. I would actually sort of be thinking of playing the knight's move here, because it's high up, and it does have, next, this would be a kind of a peep threatening to cut here, so white would be probably answering that. and black has more potential to be moving out into the center. So I would actually have a tendency to want to play on the fourth line, even though it doesn't make much eye shape. Um, White still has this stuff, so it's pretty open on the side there. So it doesn't have good eye shape yet. But it is easier to move out into the center when you've moved up to the fourth line. So I like the fourth line better. And from White's point of view, we'd probably go back a few moves. From White's point of view, if you play on the fourth line, let's put it this way. If you play somewhere on the fourth line, then you have to be ready for your opponent to jump in on the third line. So if your opponent jumps, let's put it on the same eighth line there. So if black plays here and you don't want black to get into the upper left area and you end up playing here after all, then you can see those two stones, 1 and 3, they're a bit too close to each other. So if you're expecting or worried about a third line invasion, then this stone on the fourth line has a tendency to sometimes become a bit over-concentrated if you have to reinforce it like this. So usually the natural move would be to play something on the top. In this board position, White hasn't established any territory or area towards the upper side. Like if White had a moyo there, it would be a different story maybe. White doesn't really know where the next moyo is going to be. So White doesn't want to allow black to slide like this on the second line probably. And that would explain his choice of a move on the second line. I mean on the third line. So yeah, so basically when you play high on the fourth line, you're saying that it's okay with you if your opponent jumps in the 3-3 on the third line, that is. And when you play low on the third line, you're saying that the weakness of that is from above, obviously. So you're not afraid of your opponent playing something like this from above. You're going to be happy to take the territory. So you just have to remember that if you play low, it'll give your opponent more room to play high. And if you play high, it's going to give your opponent more room to play low. And so you have to compare those two kind of things. So yeah, playing low for black though, it sort of took me by surprise, especially when white has this forcing move here. It's going to be difficult for black to make eyes anyway. So I would have played on the fourth line, but it's probably a very subtle difference there. Yeah, I was going to talk about this move actually. This move is the type of move. It's really tricky. It's the type of move that I don't think I saw it so much before we started to research Go with computer programs. It's like black is saying, white is threatening to kill that black group on the side. Black is saying, maybe I'm going to sacrifice it. Maybe I'm going to escape out into the center with the one stone, this stone here. This exchange of this stone for this stone, it did give black a little potential to sort of maybe sacrifice half of the group and move out towards the center. It's a single moment in the whole sequence where this black group is relatively flexible. And he just forgets it. And he's ready to sacrifice it or play a ko or something. And no one knows which variation he's going to go into. He's just sort of asking white what white's going to do. Maybe black's going to trade to the upper left corner. So this kind of confusing, very, very flexible variation sort of came into being after we started to study with computer programs, because it's very much AI, if you ask me. So for instance, if white does stuff like this and stuff like this, then black is, this is an example of how black might just sacrifice the whole thing. And let's say in some cases, maybe playing some forcing moves from above. Black has a forcing move in the corner here, capturing a stone. Sometimes black can find a way to sacrifice the side on a small scale. So I think this is the idea. Rick Rubinstein sometimes tries to emulate this. Yes. And I'm not surprised you crash horribly sometimes. It's a very difficult thing. It takes a lot of calculation. And just the fact that there's so many variations of what might happen, it could turn into a ko, it could be a sacrifice like this, or black might turn it around and save the whole thing. And it depends on how white reacts. So there's, like, the moment you've played that move, white has something like 2 or 3 likely answers, and the way black handles it is going to change depending on each one. So it's one of the more complicated, confusing types of fighting that has become very popular. So having said that, I'll go back one move and show you what I would call a very straightforward approach would be to play like this, and black could probably play here, and white would be getting a wall in the center and a solid territory in the upper left. And this would be okay for white. White would be okay with black surviving on the side because white has a lot of influence towards the rest of the board. So this is an example of, and because this looks bad, black would be playing differently early on. Also, black would not have, this is an example of maybe why black would not usually, I would not play this low move, because being surrounded like that and getting into a variation where black has to live on a small scale like that is sort of painful. And I would be looking for moves that actually have potential to escape out towards the center. So I would have that tendency to want to move up to the 4th line, actually in my own games. So getting surrounded like this and then doing this kind of crazy thing, it's the style of the strong players nowadays, I think. And white curled around. The way black used this was very instructive, because now black plays here. Again, it's very natural for white to enclose this black group from the center. This probably, this obviously the natural move. And now black pretty much connected up. It's not 100% connected, but it's pretty much connected. So for instance, there's variations here. Like if white plays here, black cuts, black plays here, black plays here. This doesn't look so good for white, does it? In fact, if white plays an Atari here, black's going to be able to isolate these stones and they're going to die. So this is bad for white. But if white plays on this side, it's a bit more complicated. If black cuts here, now if black goes straight into it, it's not so clear, because if black does it this way, white's going to win this. So white wins the race to capture. White's enclosed black. Looks like black's not quite alive yet. It's just going to be very painful. And so white could even be meaner and play the throw in here. And then, it'd be even worse for black. So this is obviously bad for black. And if black plays it in this order, even if black pushes through, it's not going to get much better. It's going to be, black has no idea of playing a ko here. It's not going to work. Actually, black can probably play here. And this is going to be a fight. This way, it's going to be more difficult for white to think of sacrificing that stone, because now black can play here and cover here, or get a double Atari. So this would be better for black. Or if white connects, now black is out in the center. So black would just sacrifice this one stone on the side and would be out in the center. So stuff like this could happen. But this is just the case where black is cut here. Black could also play here. And in this case, if white bumps against, this is just going to be worse for white. So if white plays here, in this case, black can actually capture the white stone at once. So maybe this is what he's going to do. This is a relatively simple way to handle it, I guess. So black's connected. You can see that just in all those variations I was just doing, I was sort of trying to demonstrate the fact that there are some complicated variations there that are sort of waiting to happen, but are not working for white yet. So it sort of depends on stuff like that would change. For instance, if at some point in the game, black ends up, like in the future of this game, we're having this big fight in the center of the board. So maybe black at some point is going to play a peep here to settle his groups in the center. And that can potentially change what happens here on the left side. So that's why white is sort of leaving it in a relatively volatile situation, because white doesn't really have anything more to lose here. So white's looking at some potential there. Okay, this is interesting. It's a kind of a modern-like move. Um, Maybe it would be more natural for black to be playing something from the stone on the side, for instance, something like this. But then, of course, white would jump into the 3-3 point probably. So it's kind of an in-between saving black stone on the side and attacking white and sort of doing all of those things, sort of protecting the corner, sort of attacking white, sort of saving the stone on the side. So it's a kind of a balance move, you might say. So the result on the left, if I were playing with black, that's Rene Villarreal again. Yeah, hello there. Hello from yesterday. So I'd say I would be happy with black if I had this position on the left where I've invaded the upper left part and managed to connect it up to my group on the side. I think that was a local success for black. But as I was saying, it does involve some complicated variations there that regard black's connection on the second line there. So that's something that white is looking at, and it's kind of a something that black has to be careful of. But I would be happy because I've scooped out the whole left side territory from white. And yeah, I might tend to give the low value to the white wall on the outside. I should be giving it a bit more value than I think it has. But I would prefer to play with black in this case. Yes, A sound does, that is true. The early influence is valuable. And so like when I looked at it with Kadago, it was a very small difference. I think Kadago liked black also, but it was pretty much the original advantage because this game is 6.5 points, so it was just staying that way. So black is trying to make shape here. A very nice light move, the double hane. And then he connected. So that's a solid move now. But with this move, he's looking at some weakness towards the white corner. We're going to see him extend from that move later. So white invades the corner. Not only is he taking some territory away from black in the corner, but this is where Ichiriki is initiating the fight. So he's going to take the territory. And now if black plays something safe, so if black is worried, wants to avoid a big fight, wants to play peacefully for once, and does something like this, running away, then white's going to be able to connect up to the other side too. So white would be able to connect up here, for instance. He might find something a bit more active, but white's taking the corner, white's taking the upper side, and black has not achieved much territory from this whole fight. So this is one of the ideas. Black is sort of probably not satisfied with that and plays there. This means that they're going to get into a big fight in which all of the groups are not alive. So this is what Ichiriki was trying to instigate here. He was trying to get into this fight because the wild fights they're really his style. I'd say Shin Jinseo is okay with wild fights also, but he's happy with close games also. He's an all-round player, and quite often he takes his advantage. He gets his advantage early in the game, and when he's behind, he just then he takes back the lead in the end game because he's a great end game player too. So his strong points are not just his middle game. He plays strongly throughout the game, and I'd say his strong points are more the opening and the end game, whereas Ichiriki is trying for a big fight, and that's his best style. I think he really is a very strong fighter. So this is white escaping, but also when you have a group in between two of your opponent's groups, unlike, like, for instance, if I was in between two bullies, I would be in big trouble. But in Go, when you're in between two groups of your opponent's groups, you actually have an advantage because every time white escapes with a move like this, white is making a double threat. So black has to deal with two groups Black has to answer. Basically, black would like to be able to answer here on the left, and but also has to deal with this group on the right. So black has two directions in which he wants to answer white, and white only had to play one move in order to create that position. So locally in this fight towards the center, white is being in between the two black groups. White gets to make double threats, while black has to choose which side to answer it. So that's what's happening here. Right, times have changed indeed. Rick Rubenstein. I think it's special to Ichiriki. He's a huge fighter. Iyama likes to fight too. So if you have Ichiriki playing against Iyama, quite recently they were playing a title match, you do get a lot of fighting. Iyama tends to take territory, and then his opponent will attack weak groups, and like I would be unhappy, but Iyama seems really happy in that kind of fight. When he's under attack, he seems happier than when he's attacking. But of course, there is the context that he's got all the territory first. And then, well, Ichiriki likes to attack. He basically likes to attack, so he's playing in his style at this point. So, yeah, white has surrounded the black stones. The question here is, how is black going to make two eyes? Black started by extending. There's an attachment at the start point. So, for instance, if white plays away, black's probably going to play this move. So this move is connected to the marked stone because basically because this would be falling apart. So if white does stuff like this, well, yeah, black would do it this way. Black would just capture this. This is going to be bad for white. So yeah, this would probably allow black to connect up to the left. There's also the cutting point here that white will have to answer at some point. So white answered there, and black cuts. White plays here. You can see white's trying to set up that attack on the left. So now, if we just ignore all of the blacks, let's say where did black? Yeah, black played here. Okay. So if we ignore those black stones cutting white, and say black plays away, now white can play here. And you can see how the marked stone is affecting this. So this is just it's going to be bad for black, obviously. And in the previous variation I was talking about, this move, this still works for white. In this case, even if black does something like this, you can see that white's going to be able to capture two stones. Also can curl around here. It's not working for black. So white is threatening the left side, and black had to answer. So this is an example of how black did have a weakness there. Yes, with Iyama, he does counterattack. That's TLS, Thomas Leonard Su, saying that Iyama seems to counterattack. Ichiriki is a mid-game attack, and Shibano is a late mid-game attack. Shibano attacks sometimes too. He plays a more all-round style, and he's not really showing it very well recently. He was in slightly bad condition, so it's sort of hard to say what exactly his style is right now. It could be changing, but Iyama likes to come under attack, and he does counterattack. So, like you have a dead group, what looks like a dead group for Iyama. In many cases, he ends up saving it by capturing an opponent's group. People are still talking about the style thing here. Ayusalon says the Japanese don't fight. Maybe it's an amateur thing. I think it's not true with the younger players anymore because they're researching Go using computer programs, which like to fight a lot. There's a lot of fighting with the computer programs, which is it's very difficult for humans to calculate sometimes, but the computer programs are good at that, of course. So they're getting a lot of practice playing against computers, a lot of practice fighting and stuff like that. They're just used to it. And so all of the young players tend to fight more, and especially the Japanese players. There was a period where the Japanese players did not fight so much, but that time is gone. Okay, so let's get back to the game. So white connected, black had to answer on the left. White still has to deal with the cut there, so that's what this move is doing. And so black cut on the fifth line, on the F line there. Um, oh, that was the sixth line, excuse me. And white ended up clasping that stone, so it's not likely that black is going to immediately be able to escape that, but for the time being, it's dead. But what black got was this stone on the third line. So basically, this exchange for white's connection and this, black needed to bump against the third line there at some point. So black was just creating a flow of moves that would allow black to add this stone to the left side and fix that problem before black starts making eyes for the center. That makes sense to me. And black plays there. So he's still making use of that stone that's cutting. And that, in that if white plays here, black can still play here. And white has to go back at some point. So it's there's still some space there for black. Black probably play here, actually. Okay, they're moving forward. So on the clocks that I see, Shin Jinseo, who's black, has 1 hour and 47 minutes, and Ichiriki has an hour and 8 minutes. And Ichiriki has a tendency to use more time than his opponent. And so quite often he gets into trouble. The game has been going on for about 3 hours now. So they started with 3 hours apiece. So that was the time control. And Ichiriki has used almost 2 hours of his time. 1 hour and 52 minutes now. And Shin Jinseo has only used a bit more than 1 hour. So you can see that eventually Ichiriki is probably going to get into time trouble. He did in the Ings Cup, but in this case at least he's going to have overtime. In this tournament, I think it's 40 seconds 5 times or something like that. I don't think it's a minute. In the Korean tournaments, they do seem to use, for the overtime, they use smaller segments. So for instance, traditionally the overtime was a number of 1 minutes. So it was, say, 5 times 1 minute or something like that. Nowadays, a lot of the Korean tournaments have made that a bit shorter. So it's maybe the same number 5 times, but it can be 40 seconds, 20 seconds, stuff like that. And Shin is a fast player. That's true. That's One Dragon again. Oh, weren't you in Twitch last time? 5 times 40 seconds on the interface. Yes, so that sounds right. So that's Keith Baterman confirming that. So again, it's interesting. Like if white wanted to keep into the center, white would have played high like this. And it's still going to be relatively difficult for black to make 2 eyes. But the fight is just going to probably spread it into the center. Maybe this way, maybe this way for the time, maybe this way for the time being. So it's sort of, and this would lead to a fight into the center. White would have 2 weak groups also. So white's group in the center is not so strong. They're both weak. So this is keeping more distance from white's group in the center, and white's going to go for the territory towards the lower right corner. And hopefully it's going to force black to play a lot of territorialist moves on the 4th and 5th lines here. So the idea is that whole string of black stones, it doesn't really have eyes yet. So white's still sort of hoping to set up an attack as the next step. Which side would I prefer? I'd say it's about even. I think black probably has. A while before I liked black, so I probably am sort of hanging on to that idea. I think black has more territory than white, has a slight advantage in territory, and I would probably feel happier with black. I just have a liking of territory, which is I'd say it's pretty natural to like territory. But there, I do think I have a slight bias there, and probably that's what's making me like black better. Running out, actually, that was James Sedgwick is saying Fine Art wanted black to run out the F8 stone, and that was something I was having trouble calculating. So let's take a look at it. I just assumed that since the players didn't play it, maybe it was a bad idea after all. So the value of escaping here is that white will eventually have to play a dominant point here to save the 3 stones. So if white pushes through, black can extend here. Black is not connected up. So white can push through here. Eventually white will be able to cut black, but white has to defend first. So white would have to defend maybe like this. And that move is really the painful move for white. And black also has to defend here. And this is painful too, but it does set up a ko. So for instance, like this, black does have a ko here, which is going to be, no, not that way. Maybe starting with this move. And this was going to be pretty annoying for white, because white's going to be losing a lot of territory if white loses the ko. So this would be a possible reason to be a good idea for black to save that stone. If black can, for instance, if black can play this bamboo joint with sente, and white has to answer it with something like this, then both sides have been, the shape has been messed up a lot for both sides. But really white 12 there, that move, playing almost a dominant point, that was the painful move that white wanted to avoid. So that would be a reason for black to escape like this. So yeah, that was a good point, James Sedgwick. L16 is probably premature. Let's take a look at the board position. So yeah, I say for the time being, it looks like black's going to be able to live on the upper side, or in the center, that is. And Alex Weavers is asking, would black want to play on the bottom at something like L16 soon? You know, that's not completely out of the question, somewhere on the lower side. But I would be a bit anxious about all of these black stones that are sort of stringed out in very loose connections. So I would still be thinking of maybe playing something like this, for instance, in which case white would probably need one more move to have a stable shape, and then playing something like this just to start reinforcing. And obviously black needs to calculate. Might be better to play something like this, actually. Calculate the weaknesses. There's some weaknesses there in black's shape that black has to patch up, basically. This would also be looking at a weakness here on the white's, a weakness here in the white group, where black can cut white off here with one of these moves. So there's this would have white starting to play here. I mean, maybe white would answer here, and black would get an extra move towards the center. So I would be, at this point, if I were black, I would be thinking about reinforcing maybe. But of course, that doesn't really get much territory. So maybe not. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if black does something along this line, or just goes for some more territory. On the lower side, black might actually play on the third line. So somewhere around here. Okay. Why didn't white capture f8 with g7? Are we talking about the net? So f8 is the black stone here. And white played g8. White could have played a net. But this would just, in this case, black would probably force with this move. and something like this. So it's I wasn't really expecting black to escape with the one stone. So I would say that it's very similar, but black is getting some good forcing moves in this case also. So I don't think it would be an issue for black. Warren Van Toronto is asking, is it too late to become a pro if you start go in the 20s? And usually it is. There are some exceptions to that, but they were very talented people who did a great deal of study in good environments. So there's a lot of, when you're, if you're that old when you start playing the game, you do need a lot of things to work well for you in order to even have a chance. There was an American who went to Japan, and I think he learned the game at the age of 19. That's James Kerwin, and he became the first professional. He actually won the. There were at that time there were sections for each rank of professional. So there was a Shodan, a one dan section for the Kisei tournament. And the year he became a pro, he did win the Shodan section. So it wasn't like, well, although he was made professional as a special case, it wasn't as if he didn't have professional strength. So he became a professional. And then he retired and went back to America. So he's teaching going to America, I think, now. Right. It's very difficult, as David Lloyd Jones is saying. So yeah, they're very even at this, and now people are. It's very usual. I mean, it's very unusual for anyone above 20 to even pass the pro test. So people who are trying to become pros, if they reach their late teens, it's usually too late. So I became a pro. I passed the test when I was 17, and so I started playing as a pro at the age of 18, and I was very late compared to the. That was when I was a young person, so it was a while ago. But I was way later than most of my rivals. So I was older, at an older age to become a professional when I was 17. So that's some kind of an example of how young most of the pros are. Okay. Wow, there's a lot of good chat happening here. What kind of attacks does white have on the right side shape? That's a good question. Um, right, yes. Okay. Dr. Evil Porcupine is making some deep comments here, yes. Okay, so let's try to find some ways for black to attack white. I mean, white to attack black. Um, one shape move would be to play, let's have black play something like this. One shape move would be to play here. This is a move that sort of jumps out at you. And, okay. And black does have to be careful of the connection here, but should be able. But for instance, in this case, black has the forcing move here. So it's not quite working for white. It's a kind of shape move where white would be taking away black's eye space to a certain degree. But it doesn't look like it in itself it's going to be a killing blow. So for instance, in this case, black would be able to capture the two stones like this. So the next move to think of would be this one. In this case, black probably pulls back here, and if black plays here, black's probably going to have enough room to make life, and white has to make a life also. So this would be another move white's looking at. Otherwise, white could be doing something like this and then trying to get out on this side. So that's another kind of a weak point. If black plays one, sometimes white will start with this side and cut on a larger scale. And if black tries to counter that with something like this, then it's a completely different fight. And again, white's looking at the weaknesses in those knight move connections. Arthur is asking, have I ever thought about making some videos about more off of the board stuff like the Pro System, playing Go in Japan, etc.? It's a good idea. I'll have to think about that. Um, yeah, there's a lot of things that interest me in playing the game, and so like I have a lot of ideas for videos right now. Um, so it might take me a bit of time to get organized with that idea, but I do think I would like to follow up on that idea. It sounds good. It's just that, like, for the time being, I've sort of started on a series of videos about openings, especially traditional openings. Like I started with a Sanrensei video, and I'm going to go into that a bit more in future videos. I'm also thinking of doing something about the Chinese opening, and these openings they're actually still pretty valid, although people don't play them so much anymore. And it's sort of interesting to try to research them with an AI, with a computer program, and find variations that don't lose the score, that don't get punished in the score rating. And so how these openings are actually, they still can work. So I'm sort of experimenting with that, which is interesting for me as a Go player. It's also interesting in making videos, I think. And I think people are still sort of attached to these openings that are so, like, openings in which black is taking the initiative and making moyos. And they have these names that people have used for many decades. Um, so it's sort of fun to try to make them work again, because people, in some cases, people seem to have sort of given up on them. Okay. So that was some ideas about how to attack black, but black has come out in the center here. And with this move, um, white's group there in the center is not 100% either. So this was a pretty important point, actually. And so by weakening white, it's probably going to make it slightly easier for black to handle this group on the right side also. So it's not as if that group is going to drop dead so quickly. Okay, so I guess that D was an F. So Roman G says he's an 8Q and he plays the patterns from my book on Sanrensei and sometimes can win a game. So next step is you watch my video on Sanrensei, which is incorporated the modern AI values, and it's a bit different. So it's and actually it's not so impossible to use for Q players also. So I tried to make something that was relatively simple and positional ideas. Okay, so to get back to Dr. Evil Porcupine's question, if the players have spent a long time reading variations before playing a move, why does it take so long to play subsequent moves? And it's because in many cases, the opponent has read the same variations and has found something that doesn't make it so easy. So it could be that the opponents played a move that was not the optimal choice. So I mean, not the optimal move for what you wanted to do, and so you have to rethink it. Um, it's definitely not so unusual for the opponent to play a move that was not expected. It happens all the time. Yes. Um, I forget what the prize money is, but it is a lot. Yes. So that's Clacky 69. Um, Another reason why they're thinking so long is because they have a lot of money on the games. Basically, what Clacky 69 was saying. Yes. Okay, so I'll take this opportunity. The game has slowed down just a little bit, so I'll take the opportunity to push my calendar. Um, let's see, I should have even a picture here. Um, to celebrate the fact that I have over 10,000 followers on my YouTube channel. So there's a calendar for 2022, and let's see how far up does it go. Somewhere around here, yeah. So this is one of the pictures that's in it on the. This is actually, I think it's December or something, and so it's an illustrated calendar with paintings or pictures, illustrations that have to do with Go. And so now I'll put some links for people who want to support my channel by buying this calendar. So it's on eBay. So that's eBay, and it's also on Amazon. Oops. Yes. So if you're interested, yeah. So or you can just look at the picture on the vendor's page. There's a different picture there. So that was my calendar, doing it for the first time. I hope people are pleased with that. They're modern paintings. Oh, Rick Rubenstein is asking who did the artwork. It's actually my daughter who paints. She's sort of um, not really a professional, but she does paint a bit. John Kirpin ordered two. Very good. Thank you very much. Oh, I forgot to add the Amazon URL. Okay, yeah. The address was right there, and I forgot to send it. Sorry about that. Um, will there be a restock of the calendar at Amazon? Actually, since I'm not personally handling that, I don't know exactly, but there probably will be. I don't even know if they ran out yet. There probably should be more. And the Amazon link should be working for it now, yes. And for people in the US, there could be a slight, I mean, I don't know. There could be a delay in the mail because mailing to America is very difficult at this time. My video on San Jinseo, you want to link to that? Okay, I can try to do that. I linked to my video on the San Jinseo, so if people were interested. That's good. Okay. So now I think it's White's turn to choose how to move out in the center. That white group in the center, it's not as if it's going to die immediately, but it does need to do something to keep sort of healthy, I think. Oh wow, Up and Down has seen the painting with the skeleton. Was that? Did you actually see the video, or is um I mean, did you actually get the calendar, or did you just see it in one of the vending pages? There's a painting with the skeleton for, I think it was for Halloween month, and that the game on it is a rendition of my game against Miyazawa Goro. So actually, I can give you a link for that game also, because if I can find it, let's see. Nope, not that one. The Broken Ladder game, yes. So there's a Broken Ladder game that I played against Miyazawa Goro, who was actually my mentor at some point. Um, he taught me a lot when I was on the way to becoming a professional, and and he played this crazy game against me where he chased a ladder that didn't work, and he actually did it on purpose. So that's where that painting came from, because there's a painting of a skeleton playing Go and with a Go board in the background, and it is that ladder shape in the game, pretty close to the actual board position. So yeah, if you watch that video, you're going to see the same board position in the middle game. Okay, so white, the game has continued a little bit. So white played the shape move here. This is the shape move, and is sort of tickling black from underneath here. Black has to find a way to connect these stones up. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, the calendar is hand autographed too. So all of the calendars are hand autographed. It has my signature on the final page. So that's another selling point, I suppose. I should say my autograph. So here, black is not connected as it stands. So black has to find a way to connect up. That video is actually, it's one of my older videos. It's from, I forget when I made it, but it could be something like a year old. And so people can tell me um, how my style of commentating the games has changed, maybe. Okay, Rick Rubenstein is asking, does the clamp? Oh, the clamp there. That would it would work. I think he's talking about this clamp. So this is a move that would work. And if white escapes in this direction, this is probably not. This is probably okay for black. It's not a big. Actually, black would connect with 5, but this is it's hurting white's position on the side. So this would probably be okay. But it would be more normal to play this one first, actually. Playing here, and then maybe here. Now, this is what I was expecting to happen. But in the game, he plays here. So for the time being, if white cuts this way, oh, that wasn't a diagram, this way. If white cuts this way, black can play here, and this is going to be a forcing move. So if white answers here, then black can play probably here. It doesn't look so good for white. So that's the idea with the marked move here. White cannot cut quite yet. So I would say it looks like black is thinking of getting some forcing moves here on the way to saving the black group. So it may be something like this in this case. Just reinforcing his shape on the whole. Hey, do I have a favorite motto like people write on folding fans? Well, Japanese in Japan and most of Asia, people have these characters that they write on fans. So when I made a Japanese style fan, I wrote, there was a character I wrote. It's sort of difficult to um, explain it in English. It roughly, one of the ways it's used translates to believe. It's Shin. And the character itself is actually, um, it's a combination of two basic characters, which are, one of them is almost a pictogram of a person standing up. So there's the person character, and there's a character that means to talk, and it's a Chinese character. So it's a character that comes from China, I believe, and it's still used in Japanese language. Um, I'm pretty sure it's still used in China also, only they might have abbreviated it. I'm pretty sure they've abbreviated the language part. Oh, hello, wasabi no go. Wasabi no go. Okay, wasabi no go. That sounds Japanese. Wasabi is a very hot Japanese taste. It's a hot tasting. I guess it would be called an herb. Um, and um, so he's hot go maybe. So how did I learn Go in Japanese? I learned Go first, but obviously because I learned Go when I was still living in California, and my father had some Go books in Japanese. English books had started to come out from a publisher called Ishi Press, um, but there were still not so many. They were limited in numbers. So he had some Japanese books. Actually, this is a story. I've probably told it before. It's a story of that links up to my future teacher because the books were by Maeda Nobuaki, and they're a famous collection of life and death problems, which I think we have them in English also. And they've been reprinted in Japanese. Yes, Renee Villarreal got the right character there. That's the character that I wrote. And there's a story about that character, and that it's that the origin of that character is actually that it's a person's saying something, and that in the old times when they created these characters, it was expected that if you said something, you should be believed. And so there's this person, this an author in Japanese literature who made that definition of the character and said that it means that a proper person should be able to be believed. And so I sort of like that, and I made it my character. But Rick Rubenstein is asking about my calligraphy. It's not very good, but when I made the sensu, the Japanese style fan, um, the actual fans were printed, so I only had to get it right once. So I wrote that about 100 times and finally got something that I liked. Okay, so I forgot what I was talking. I was talking about the Go books that I studied that were in Japanese, and they were problem books, Life and Death. It's actually something that people probably get. Midas Smego. Yes, it was partially translated in English. Oh, really? Only the middle volume? Um, and it was 3 volumes when I had it. And I studied, and it was from double digit Q to Don level, and they were all graded. And so I went through these problem books, and it was all in Japanese. So I learned the character for black, and I learned the character for white, and I could recognize the character for correct, which is a relatively simple character in Japanese. And so I got by with that. And I sort of had trouble with the character for the wrong answer, but I could sort of guess what it was. And then sometimes there were the tricky ones, like some variations that were not a variation of the correct answer or the wrong answer sometimes. And I didn't really know what that was, but if you look at the diagram, usually you can figure it out. Well, yeah, Rene Villarreal is true. You don't really need the translation, apart from the fact that you need to know whose turn it is. So that's, I just learned the two characters for black and white, and I was pretty much all set with that. So I learned Go, and then one of the first things I did was to learn those Japanese characters that I needed for that book. And then I learned Japanese after I came to Japan. I learned Japanese because I was living in with at my teacher's house, and all the kids there who were my own age, they kept telling me, they kept lying to me about how to say Japanese. So I made all these mistakes, and that's how I learned Japanese. hmm Oh yeah, well I learned a lot though. You could say kids are mean everywhere, but yeah. Without making the mistakes, it would have been a lot more difficult to learn Japanese. So I'm in retrospect, it doesn't bother me. Rene Villarreal is asking what kind of smiggle or problems do pros use? And it's different from the type of problems that are good for instance, Q players or weaker players, because when you start doing life and death problems, or smiggle or anything like that, Tetsuji problems, um, these should be shapes that you're going to use in your actual games. And if you're doing a very basic problem set, um, then quite often they will be. They will be problems that are derived from some joseki, or that will actually, you can expect them to happen in real games. So those are the problems in which you're not only exercising your reading abilities, but you're also picking up some knowledge about a shape that can happen in your own games, and it's very useful. So that's what I would say about problems that are good for Q players to do, and probably most Dan players also. Okay. And this looks like it was just a misclick by the operator. It's probably going to take back and correct that fairly soon. So we'll wait for, the moves were moving forward, but they're wrong now, obviously. So we'll see what happens with that. But professionals actually, like the Kanzufu, well, Kanzufu was actually, it was an ancient Chinese collection of problems that the author found interesting. So many of them are actually very useful. But then in the Edo era, so for instance, 1700s, 1800s, I guess, there were some much more complicated and difficult problem sets, which would take hours for a professional to digest or to understand. Okay, we're back to an earlier position. That makes sense. And these problem sets, not only did they provide exercise for reading ability, but they were also forcing the player to hold a position in mind for long periods of time. So it's actually it helps us create kind of a mental image of the board that we can hold in our mind, and when we calculate positions and look try to look into the future of the game, we have to be able to hold the position in our mind. And creating that kind of go board in our head is something that doing these difficult problems is supposed to help. I think I missed some good questions there as I was talking. I'll just go on with what I see here. So if you said something really good, don't just say it again, and I'll react to it next time. Okay. Right. Yes. Chinese and Japanese, basically the written languages, it's the same language, only the Japanese added on phonetics. So yeah, that would be the issue for the Chinese people. I have noticed that the Chinese people who live in Japan tend to have trouble with the foreign-derived words in Japanese that don't really have a connection to Chinese, and they're just phonetics, and so it's sort of meaningless. Whereas the words that are attached to some Chinese character, for instance, or have a similar word in Chinese that is same meaning, these are relatively easy for Chinese people to understand. So it's something that the Japanese added on there. So Rick Rubenstein's clamp has come up here. In this case, it's obviously the good shape to make blacks, the good move to make black's shape there. Black messed up white's shape on the left side. So let's go back to the game. Oh yeah, talking about wasabi again. It was wasabi go the username got people started talking on wasabi. Okay, so when black did this, black is trying to mess with white's shape here. So that's what this whole sequence is. And if white answers underneath, this is just perfect for black. Black would, it would probably, actually black might play it this way anyway. For instance, something like this. And black would have a very good shape there. Or black could bump against. This connects black also. So this was black's idea. And white could not, that would be a bit painful for white. So white decided he couldn't allow that, and he bumped against here. So potentially black is getting some profit towards the corner. But in return, black's shape on the outside was sort of falling apart. So black's trying to fix the shape with this move. If white plays here, black can probably, let's see, how is this going to work? This could be tricky. Maybe black's going to play on this side and sacrifice those two stones. Or maybe not. Looking at a variation like this, it is sort of dangerous. It could end up in a trade, actually. Because white's not alive on the side either. So this kind of thing could happen, I guess. And white's stones on the side would die. The corner still has potential to live. Right. Oh, thanks for following up on the question about Sakata. I think I just barely saw that one. And yes, I did play Sakata. Actually, I played him twice. So you should watch that video too. There's a video of my game against Sakata. You can just go to my channel and search for Sakata. That will probably find the video. Okay, back to the game. So black is, locally, it's a kind of a desperate attempt for black to make some kind of a shape on the side here. Meanwhile, he has gained a lot towards the corner, so it's sort of hard to judge the trade there. And I've only looked at the one variation, have I? Okay, I'm not going to talk about the sushi business in America. Okay. I don't know anything about it. But it is true, that if when you're doing ethnic food in America, it's quite common that um, the people running the restaurant are not the nationality you might expect. R13 at O12. So, Carl is saying that Kata proposed R13 at O12. So R13 is this move, and O12, um, O12 would be here. Yeah. Okay. So it would be here. This is actually playing something towards the outside um, is conceivable. That would be a conceivable move. Um, I just I don't have any good immediate answers. The black group in the upper right, it looks like it's in a great deal of danger. So yeah, I think that makes sense, and I don't know. Okay, David Lloyd Jones is asking to get invited to the sensei's house. Uh, you must have been a serious player before you went over. So actually, when I was 14, I went to Japan. Well, actually, I went when I was 13, but then that was just for summer vacation. Then I came back to Japan when I was 14, and for the first year, I was not actually living with my teacher. So I was already in the study group to become for potential professionals, and I played a year in that. And then after that, it was decided I needed a teacher, and I sort of applied for one. And my teacher, Mr. Oida, was the only person who was actually taking students at that time. So it was so he accepted me. So it's I guess I was a serious player. I was in the INSEE, which is the school for it was the school for potential professionals. And I remember I was the 19th, I was the number 19. My rank in this school was 19. And at that point, there was a large number of students. It was probably more than 60, somewhere between 60 and 100. Yes. And Paxton Yu has the character for Insei. This is also used for universities. That's when people stay over the 4 years. Okay, so now black has hit a weak point in white's position. This is getting really messy. Let's take the game back a few moves. So white played here, and then here. And this whole... So I think the idea here is that basically white is waiting for black to play here, and then white was planning to play this exchange. So if white had played this exchange first, then it would be more like this, and black would be out in the center. So white is going to play this exchange, and if black pulls back here, which seems a sort of a normal move, then white was probably going to play here. Although black squeezes, you can see that black stone at 2 is sort of wasted in this case. So maybe this is what white was aiming at. And black is countered with this stone, which is an attack against white's weakness. And what's going to happen here? So for instance, if white plays here and black plays here, this looks like it could be trouble for white. So in this case, white's not actually connected because black can cut here. So black would capture the white stones towards the upper side here. And if white plays here, it's a similar thing happening here. Black can play here. If white answers this way, black always has this move. So this would cut white. White can escape by playing here. But in this case, black's probably going to just take here. And locally, it was a painful variation for white. The fight will continue something like this. Black does have an eye there. kind of a potential eye on the side. Looks like black, if black really is serious about trying to live, black can probably use moves like this. Black has a potential eye there, kind of an eye. Let's have white play this exchange. Black seems to have enough eyes, so it would be something like this and something like this. Yeah. Well, actually, maybe this way. So that would be alive. So an example of how black might be planning. Black's idea is probably that if white plays like this, black wanted to capture that stone anyway, maybe. So that's probably the idea behind what black's doing. Okay. Oh, okay. My Insei class, like there were so many people who became professionals, it's hard to say. Um, People who became professional in my own year, I think most of them became 9 dans. There's one or two who are 8 dans right now. So yeah, it's they've had time to move up the ranks. 9 dan is not as big a deal as it used to be. Okay, up and down is asking what is the remaining time for the players. That's a question I can give an estimate at least. On the server here, it says Shin Jinseo has 1 hour and 28 minutes, so he hasn't used much time. And Ichiriki has about 36 minutes left. So that means he's quickly running short of time, and he's using it much more quickly. So like Shin Jinseo has used about 1/2 of his time. And Ichiriki has used 5/6 of his time. Okay. Okay, so white did play there. I was sort of showing that this is the one way that white can connect up in the center. It's good for black that this is really reinforcing black's group in the center. Excuse me. Pablo Garcia is saying, are there two Ichirikis? Well, it's a family name, so there's a lot of them. But as far as Go is concerned, Ichiriki is the only Go player that I know of. So only one. His father is a fairly well-known person because he's I think he's the president or maybe even the owner of a pretty important media company. What's the difference than just playing white N9? So I think that's something I sort of tried to explain before, but let's go into it again. So if white plays here, I think the issue is that black can play here, threatening to cut white on the other side. So if we assume a shape like this, actually white can play here and save that, can't he? All right. So yeah, I think 3 is probably forcing. We can look at that. So if black plays this way, oh, that doesn't work. So if black plays this way, Let's put this one in also. Okay, this looks really dangerous for black. Maybe white will push through this way. It's very difficult for me to calculate this. This is bad for white. So that didn't work. Looks like maybe this is working for black. Oh yes, but of course, yeah. So this move here is the issue that I haven't solved at this point. So if white connects here, oh, white connects here. Maybe I'm just making a mistake. So in this case, yeah, this would work for white. Oh no, it wouldn't, would it? So if we assume black can push through here and play like this, black can actually cut white. So that's a problem that white has there. It doesn't seem to be connected up. So if white plays here, in this case, black would be able to capture this way. So white has to try to find... That's why I was trying to force with this one. If white can force like this, white's connected with this move. So that's the issues that I'm having with white here, because white 3 doesn't seem to be forcing. So that's a reason for white to be playing this move first, just to get the connection there. To squeeze like this, white now is connected in the center. Actually, I think this whole variation there that I was talking about, the players were more focused than I was just now, and they probably had it completely worked out. Probably before they even got into this variation. Okay, Decision Scientist is talking about the Japanese modern Dan system. When I came to Japan, they had something called the OTI, which is what he's put down there in characters. And it was a system where you played with other players who were around your own rank. Good morning, Godave. And if you won a lot of games, you would promote. And the weakness with this system was that some people who had stopped improving but were still active professionals, and they got as high in the ranks as they could really expect. They weren't playing as seriously as the younger players who were moving up in the ranks. So it became very easy, relatively easy. I probably shouldn't say very easy, but it became relatively easy for younger players to move up in the ranks. And for instance, in my case, most of the time I was promoting to a higher rank every year, up to 5 or 6 dan. That brought an inflation of the professional ranks. So in the present system, it is much more difficult to promote, and the ranking system, you have to be winning a lot of games, a huge amount of games actually. It's from 8 to 9 dan, I think it's 220 games or something like that in the tournament game. So for a player who's winning, say, 20 games a year, which is probably pretty good, it would still take more than 10 years to promote from 8 to 9 dan. And that's just the 8 to 9 dan part. It's relatively easy lower ranks. It gradually gets more difficult. So it would take a whole lifetime to promote. Normally, people like Ichiriki, Iyama, Shibano, Toranamaru, people like that have promoted quickly because they did something special. So for instance, in the case of people like Ichiriki or Iyama, they took a title. So they won a title match, and that's how, and that sort of jumped them to higher rank. So if you're in a final section of a tournament and you're in a round robin league to choose the challenger, I think that already promotes you to 7-dan professional. So you see a lot of young professionals jump from 3-dan to 7-dan very quickly. So that they're about 3-dan by the time, if they're winning a lot of games, it takes them a little while to get to the final stages of a tournament, and then they do something like that and they promote to 7-dan. Also, if you take one of the more minor titles, I think that gives you a 7-dan also. And then if you keep the title for more than 1 year, then you promote to 8-dan. And the same, and with the 3 major titles, that's 1 rank higher. So that's how they get to 9-dan. They keep a major title, or they do a lot of good stuff, basically. So that's how the ranking system works. Now, for very promising young players, it actually promotes them more quickly. So the people who are at the top of the Go scene in Japan actually promoted to 9-dan much more quickly than they would have in the past system, because we have these special rules that allow them to jump to 7-dan, 8-dan, or 9-dan. Yeah, but most players, if you're just doing it on the accumulated wins, then it does take longer. Okay, we're talking Go history here. So Paxson Yu is saying back in the days when there was only 1 9-dan in the world, if there was one. I actually was talking about that this morning when I was at the US Go Twitch channel with the American Go Association. They most of the time they would choose a Meijin, who is the leader of the Go community, and he was the pipeline between the Go community and the government who was sponsoring Go. And so he had a lot of power over what happened in the Go community. He also had to okay people who would promote to higher ranks and stuff like that. Very powerful person. He was also, and there was no 9-dan in the ranking system. He was not called a 9-dan, but in the system, his rank was equivalent to what we would call a 9-dan. So they only had up to 7-dan, and there was a Meijin, the leader of the Go community, who was a 9-dan, and would give these 7-dans a 1 stone handicap. So the 7-dans would take black against him. And then in between that, there was a Jun Meijin, which sort of translates to kind of a vice Meijin. He was a semi-Meijin maybe, and that was equivalent to an 8-dan rank. So in this fight, it looks like black is under attack here, but white's group in the center is also under attack. So yeah, that's what's happening with this move. I think Goseigen was maybe the second 9-dan in the modern system in the 20th century. So it was modern, more modern than the Edo era, not as modern as it is now. He was the first 9-dan, one of the first 9-dans in the modern OTI system. I think Fujisawa Kuranosuke, who later changed his name to Hosai, Fujisawa Hosai, was maybe the first 9-dan. And for a while, they only had 2 9-dans. Kitani Minoru, I think at that stage he was trailing by 1 rank most of the time, but pretty soon after Goseigen, he became a 9-dan also. So this looks like it could easily end in a crash for one side or the other. Like there's all these dead groups all over the place. For the time being, white is threatening to capture 2 black stones in a ladder. And that's correct, Decision Scientist. AlphaGo did become an honorary 9-dan. That was when it played Lee Sedol and beat Lee Sedol 4-1 in the 5-game match, the famous one. And it was given a 9-dan diploma by the Korean Go Association. This is the kind of big fight that Ichiriki likes. With that white group in the center, it's not alive. The black group on the left of it is pretty strong now. I'm thinking it looks a bit dangerous for white. So maybe not the fight he was hoping for, but the type of fight, yes. It just looks so dangerous, like white's not alive on the side yet, and white is not alive in the center. Black, of course, is not alive either, so it could go either way, but it does look very dangerous for white. Green Tea Dragon says it's a very tough position, especially for white. So black had to cover on the outside because white was threatening to capture 2 stones in the ladder. White can cut once, but cannot really cut a lot of times. So at some point, white's going to have to connect at P12. Okay. Michael Go 361 in Twitch is saying, what do you make of the epic battles between Iyama and Ichiriki? They're meeting yet again at the Kisei title match. So, both Iyama and Ichiriki are very strong against everyone else. So it's basically 2 strong players. Shibano Toramaru, of course, is an outstanding young player, but for some reason he's not doing so well recently. So he's having a bad time just now. Probably, he's still young enough that his game can change. So he might be in the process of changing his style, which sometimes does cause you to lose games. So for the time being, it's just Ichiriki and Iyama. And when they play each other, they get into these huge fights. I think sort of Iyama is sort of, you might say, sort of goading Ichiriki. He takes territory, and Ichiriki sees an opportunity to attack. And most of the time, it's not all that successful. And Koro-chan, 13, is asking, what about Kyokagen 9-dan? And Kyokagen from Taiwan. Okay. Thomas Leonard Su is also talking about Kyokagen from Taiwan. He's a very promising player. On the whole, he has a very good record. He doesn't seem to do very well against Iyama, as far as I can remember. So that's a big problem when you're trying to take a title in Japan. Like Iyama, there's no way of escaping Iyama. M13, the M13 cut has not been played yet. So yeah, so this is the board position. The M13 cut would be this move. But I was just doing this to show that, this actually would be dangerous probably, even if black plays here and something like this. No, actually white could connect underneath. This looks like it would be okay. Yeah, so white's surviving. So it's not as if this is out out of the question. Black will probably extend there. But white cannot go this far because this would just be terrible shape, and it would black would be alive, and white would not be alive in the center. So this is probably going to be a collapse for white. So white would eventually have to back off anyway, and black would probably connect here. And again, the issue is that white's not alive in the center, so the upper part of the board, the top side. White and moving out here is sort of painful. And black's going to be able to live with this group in the upper right. Like a move, something like this. Black's going to have no trouble living there. Black also has an eye on this side. For instance, like this. Black can find ways to make that eye without even playing 14. Black could just play here. Okay. So we're sort of heading into that variation. Black is hoping for that variation, and that white connected. Let's get to the game view. White connected. Immediately, black connected. So if white plays the two cuts, then it's going to be the same variation. And instead, white escaped towards the center. So this white group in the center of the board was a little bit cramped, and black gets to connect here. White's group on the right there, it's still not completely alive. Black's group in the center is probably going to be okay. And black's group on the right there is okay. I think this is turning out okay for black. So black doesn't really have any big worries in this variation. Okay, the next question from Koro-chan 13 was, do you think Rina Fujisawa is maybe a first lady to have a title soon? And she's a young lady who does have potential to do well in the general tournaments that are not limited to women alone. So she's going to do fairly well in those tournaments also. She has some potential. I don't really see her beating people like Ichiriki or Yama at this point, though. So it's there's a difference in level there. Of course, she has most of the female tournaments. Mm-hmm. Up and down is asking about the direction of white covering when black invaded the 3-3 point. So that's way in the past in this game. It's like black invaded there on the 5th move, and white's covering on was the 6th move. People can block on either side. I don't think it's completely out of the question for white to block on the other side. But the strange thing about these modern 3-3 point josekis is that in some of the variations, the direction of the wall is going to change around. So when a player covers from the opposite side of I don't think I want to do that now when the game is moving, but I could show you a diagram later. Sometimes the direction of the wall of white's influence, in this case, if we're talking about where white had a star point in the lower left corner, sometimes the direction of the influence changes. And so sometimes it's feasible to be playing the covering move from a different direction than where you wanted to make the influence. Okay, I would say at this point, like that black group in the center there is probably 100%. I don't see how I can't conceive how it might die. So I'd say that black group is alive. And black's group on the right, if we had white play first, it would not be 100% alive, but it's pretty close to being alive. Obviously, white is alive in the corner, and at some point, black's probably going to play an Atari there and make a ko out of it. White's group in the center is still floating, so that's not alive yet. And white's group on the side it's not really determined yet. It's not 100% alive, but it does have the Atari on the first line, the connection. Yes. Okay, to mention time, Shin Jinseo is about 1 hour and 20 minutes left, and Ichiriki has about 22 minutes left, according to the server that I'm watching now. Okay, that's a good question. Shenzhou is asking, what is the thinking that helps one know when to extend and when to capture in situations like the choice between P18 and Q18? So that's white's capture in the lower right corner. And almost always it's good to capture. But sometimes you're afraid of the ko here. And sometimes you should be afraid of the ko. So, but like in general, the fact that black has to play an Atari here, black has to take the ko, probably has to play one more move and win the ko anyway. It takes a lot of moves for black to actually finish off this white group in the corner. It means that white usually should not be so afraid of the ko. Usually white should welcome the ko. And if black cannot play the ko and ends up playing something like this, just looking at the corner locally, then this is going to be so much better for white when the game comes to the end and we end up with something like this. It's going to be just so much better at territory. That's why taking is almost always better. But you do have to be ready for the ko to start. Just some people are sort of allergic to kos, but in order to play well, to play correctly, you have to be to some extent, you have to be comfortable with the idea that sometimes there will be kos. And so usually it's better to capture. When you extend, it gives your opponent this forcing move, which is pretty valuable, usually. Okay, back to the game then. Okay. So black made the shape in the center. This reinforces black's center group and is jumped out. White's still in trouble there. So white doesn't really have time to attack on the right because black would surround. Okay, let's have it this way. Black would surround white this way, and this would capture white in the center. White doesn't really have any black group to play race to capture with. So white jumped out and black plays here. So black is moving out with this group, and now white has to do something about the group on the side because it's not really alive. It's not. So for instance, if white continues playing away, black can play here. And locally, white is not alive. So for instance, if white plays here and black plays here, that's just one eye. And if white plays here, black can just play here. It's not alive anyway. So it all depends on what happens on the outside. Probably pretty dangerous for white. Yeah. So so white's probably going to continue with something. I wouldn't be surprised if white does something like this to attack black on the right. And it's going to be a fight there, and it's also going to be a fight in the center. Because white's group in the center there, coming from the top side, that group is white is going to have issues with that group. If I were white, I would feel I was in trouble. Yes. That's Irish Gamer asking if I would feel like I was in trouble. Yes. There's also the fact that white's group on the left there, it's not completely finished. So in some cases, for instance, just looking at the left side here, and this is probably actually bad for black. So let's say that somehow they've finished the shape here. I don't really see it finishing that easily. It's going to be a ko or something. It's really dangerous. So like in this case, it looks like white might be losing that group on the side. But whatever, if we ignore that for the time being, even if we just look at the left side here, this move is going to put white in trouble in the center. And also in some cases, we're going to see black doing stuff like this, for instance. And the computer really wants to cut there, but I don't think it's a good idea. And escaping with this stone, because we have to remember this stone still has the potential to escape. And the whole white group does not have eyes. So there's stuff like this that could happen. Of course, it's given that white has to answer at 11. In actual play, there might be more urgent areas to play. So that might not always happen. But you can see how this white group can potentially get into trouble also. And there's not really any black groups that are getting into trouble here. There's just these groups on the right part of the board. And I think black actually has local ways to handle them. But in any case, the issues on the left side of the board and then in the center on the top side, these are going to be big problems for white, and they're more important. There's more space. They're more sizable. I think we have to get back to the game. It's moving forwards. So white did split there, split black into two. Yeah, maybe that's the better move. And let's see. So there is a good possibility that white's going to be able to capture the 5 black stones on the right, and black is probably, in that case, black would try to attack white in the center. So the idea there would be, for instance, if white plays here and if black plays here, it looks like black's going to lose these stones on the right, but black could continue like this, and white's group on the top there already it's in pretty bad trouble. And again, that group on the left is not very healthy either. So I think this is white's plan. Okay, Renee Villarreal is asking was I rooting for either of the players. So I like both of them, and especially Shin Jinseo is one of my favorite players just because he's so good. He's so strong. But as far as my live streams, I try to follow the Japanese players as much as possible, just because they have some pretty strong players, but they have not been doing well in the international tournaments. So I would like to see the Japanese players showing up more at the top levels of the international tournaments. And I think I would probably try to be following that with my live streams and stuff. So that's something that I'm sort of I'm paying attention to it, and it's something I'm very interested in. There are players that, for instance, I've played Ichiriki myself. He's a very tough player to be playing against, so I have respect for his strength in the game, and I would like to see that sort of reflected in his results in these international tournaments. Okay, so we're sort of on course here for the variation that I was thinking of. Right. Hmm. Okay, just to show potential for white too. So let's take a look at this is another forcing move. If white allows black to play here, white will not be able to cut here. So this would capture the cutting stones. Even if white cuts here, it's the same thing. It doesn't work for white. So white would probably connect and then connect underneath here. So white needs this one stone here if this is the case. And in actual play, black might even start the ko at this point. So white would like to push through here. So I'm going to assume that white pushes through this far, which would capture the whole corner. And this would happen. We do have to remember that the black group, maybe that's not 100% alive. So just to look at that. So in order to have an effective attack, I think white probably has to start here. And black will play here. Black has half an eye there, half an eye here. Let's see. It looks like it's not 100% alive. So let's say, otherwise black could play here. And this would maybe be better. White would play here. In this case, it looks like black has an eye locally there. And then could play here. It is difficult for white to kill it, but not impossible. So this would be... this would not be alive. Yeah, so maybe it's not 100% alive. So that would be an issue that black has to be aware of in this fight that's starting here. So with this splitting attack that's about to happen, black does have to remember that the black group on the right, if white plays first there, it doesn't look like it's 100% alive. And the black group on the right is bigger than the white group on the left. So a trade would be bad for black. I still think black's probably going to start with the peep here because there's nothing lost in playing this move. And black's next move, like this would be the straightforward move, and white would jump here. Or black could try to find something a bit more active, like maybe playing once here and then something like this. Getting a bit more space for the black group on the right. And then black would probably be alive whatever happens. So if we assume something like this and something like this, this might be a more effective way for black to attack white. Now, if white can take this extra territory in the lower right area and then survive everywhere, I bet it's going to be a win for white. Now, would it be a seki if both sides got surrounded? Sometimes that could happen, but I sort of doubt it would happen in this case. I think in most cases, if it turns to a race to capture, in most of the cases, black's going to win. You just look at the shapes of the two. I think we're talking about white's group from the top side to the center and black's group from the top side to the right side. You look at white's shape, and it's pretty much covered up on the left there. So white doesn't have so many outside liberties. If we look at the black group, it has some extra liberties on the first line on the top side, some extra liberties on the right side there. Black seems to have a lot of relatively more outside liberties when we compare this black group for white. So for the time being, I would expect black to win any kind of semi. But you never know. It sort of depends on a lot of factors there. Okay, back to the game then. K16 for black looks like it could, yeah. In this shape, black has a kind of a potential eye in the vicinity of black 3, or the K16 move. Oh, back to the board position. And so they're at this point. And Shin Jinseo seems to still have more than an hour on his clock. So an hour and 12 minutes is what the server here is saying. And Ichiriki has 16 minutes. So this is a point where if black calculates correctly, it looks like black can finish off the game. So that's what he's trying to do with his with thinking now. He's trying to read it out, you might say, to calculate the whole fight here and find a road towards victory. So it's trying to read out a sequence to victory. Because this is the type of position where black is expecting to be able to do that. Yeah, so it is dangerous for black also. This is green tea dragon is hinting. It is sort of dangerous for black also. But if black, so, but I think black can find a way to handle it, which is not lethal. So that's the variation I was showing before. Black, this first move is pretty obvious. So this is a move that he could have played more quickly. But maybe having played that, and it's a move, he might be just playing it as kind of a segue to his next thinking, but it could indicate that he's already figured out a sequence that he wants to play. So white's pretty much forced to connect. Conceivably, like in some cases, if the point at L14 is really, if white thinks it's really important, it's conceivable that white could play something like this and play at this point. But speaking of races to capture, semis, this kind of connecting it is going to fill all of white's liberties. It's usually kind of a surefire way to lose the semi. So it's usually not a good idea. Another important thing is that the black group, if black plays first on the right, it's going to be very easy for black to make a life. So attacking this black group depends on white playing first at this point. So for instance, in a case like this, if white plays first here, white can reduce black to one eye locally. But of course, if black has some room on the lower side here, so like this, for instance, it's going to be relatively easy for black to make an extra eye there. So I think if black starts with 4, it's going to be relatively easy for black to live on both sides and cut white at the same time. Okay, sounds like maybe I know what I'm talking about. So they're doing the same variation, and at this point, white has no way of connecting up to the left. Okay, attaching is more complicated. Yeah. But it looks like Shin Jinseo was ready for that move too. It's the same. It's basically the same. It still looks like white's best shape is probably just to pull back here, which would revert to the previous variation. But he could be thinking of trying this move, which would change it at least. So it would change it, maybe not for the better, but it would change it at least. This doesn't look so good for white though. It's a pity that this side, like there would be some potential there if this was not a ladder, but since it's a ladder, that makes it even worse for. It's just like, if it were not a ladder, white would have ideas for some kind of a trade there, but since it's a ladder, it's just no good. This is looking a bit dangerous, a bit desperate. Mm-hmm. I-11. I-11 doesn't seem to be working. So the clock on the server here says that Ichiriki has 11 minutes left, and he's probably gonna. This is a tough position, so I wouldn't be surprised if he uses all of his time up. The AI on the Nihon King stream says that black is leading only 30 points. That's enough. So the exchange for the right bottom might be somewhere else than killing the top white. Yes, that's so for instance, okay, now let's just try make a kind of a hypothetical variation here where both sides manage to live. So let's see if I can do that. So something like this, something like this. Let's say that both sides have managed to make two eyes. It's probably not correct, but just trying to get a general idea. And okay. So yeah, and let's give black Sente at least. So something like that. My gut feeling, there's the question of whether black can kill white with this move, or maybe black has to play something like this. And it depends on a lot of the details. I was probably a bit sloppy about making that variation there. But in some cases, black will want to play this exchange first, and white will have the option of playing this kind of stuff and sacrificing. This would be a case where it's a kind of a trade, and black has gained something, but maybe that's only 30 points. But I hear them making moves, so let's it's the variation I was showing before. Okay, let's get back to the game. It's heating up again. So so white bumped against and is cut what black off there. Yeah, this looks pretty desperate for white. So first of all, like I was saying, the ladder here favors black, so white doesn't have anything. Maybe this was what Rick Rubenstein was suggesting before, but this doesn't work. So white doesn't have any way to fiddle that. And when the ladder doesn't work, white doesn't have much opportunities there. By playing this Hane on the second line, black has established a potential eye on the lower side. So what I'm saying about that is that, for instance, if white covers here and connects, that means that when white tries to kill the black group with something like this, black should be able to get at least one eye. So something like this. Black has an eye there. Black has an eye here. So something like, for instance, something like this. So black has an eye at this point, or at this point, for instance, and is going to die when white does this, but has another eye here. So this would actually have been an eye with Sente, actually. Or in some cases, black can even force with this move to get two eyes there. So the fact that black has established some eyes on the lower side is going to make it possible for black to live with the whole group there. And white's group in the center doesn't look like it has eyes in this variation. So white, it's not an option for white anyway. Okay, this has to do with the ladder, and white's trying to reinforce the group in the center. White's only hope really is to get some kind of a counterattack here. I would have tried something a bit more fancy, but this is very much Shin Jinseo. Once he thinks he's winning, he just doesn't do anything. And white still has not captured that cutting black stone. So in some cases, black's going to be able to... I think we're actually pretty close to... I wouldn't be surprised if we're close to a resignation. Okay, so if white plays elsewhere, for instance, black does still have the potential to escape here. So there's still the issue of white's group on the left there. And white actually added another stone here, which still doesn't capture the black stone, but it's probably not a big problem anymore, because if black escapes this shape, white already has an eye there. So having an eye there, white should be able to save the whole group. White probably can easily make 2 eyes now. And in this variation, black would be getting into trouble, actually. So black is just very carefully connecting all the stones. Yes. Doesn't really seem to make any difference in black's eyes on the right, but black's alive on the right anyway. So I think the white group is going to die now. And white's trying to make a race to capture out of it. Maybe white's last chance here is to make a race to capture. It just doesn't seem to work. K3. Oh, that eye. Yeah, there's an eye there, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about pulling out the one stone in the center. Looks like black can make eyes here also. So, for instance, if we have something like this and something like this, it looks like white probably has to answer that. Yeah. So here. So there's at least one eye here. This might be happening later anyway. And then if white plays here, then black could play this one. Oops. But 9 was bad. 9 should be on this side. An example of how black can make 2 eyes. So in this case, yeah, white does seem to have some potential to win if it did turn into a semi-eye, because white has some liberties on this side. So these 4 points here were liberties that white had, and then white had an extra liberty. So white had a good number of liberties on the outside of the white group, and black did not. Black just had these 2, and then some in the center. So maybe white had, assuming a race to capture, maybe white had an advantage. But it looks like black should be able to make 2 eyes. Oh, okay. So white has resigned. And Shin Jinseo has won. I think we had the same kind of scenario in the Sangsum Cup, where 3 Chinese players made it to the semifinals, and Shin Jinseo was the only Korean player in the semifinals, and I think he won that tournament. So he's a pretty formidable player to be in the semifinals. And I think the Chinese players actually had a study group, which they called the study group to figure out how to beat Shin Jinseo. So maybe that's what they're going to be doing now. So that's it for now. I don't really have a schedule for the rest of the tournament, but I will be following it. So if anyone finds when the next game of this tournament is going to be played, you can send me a message or whatever. Make a comment to my YouTube channel or something, and I'll be following that also. So let's hope that I can work the schedule out and that I have the time to do a stream for the next one too. So that's it for this live stream. I'm about to finish. Don't forget to sign up to my channel. Let's see if I can find a link. Just in case some of you have not signed up to my channel yet. It's so my YouTube channel is this one. And so yeah, so this is my YouTube channel. And this is my Twitch channel, which is brand new. Just copying and pasting here. And for those of you who want to support me, or support my channel, that is, I have a Patreon channel. Let's see if I can find my, okay, see if I can find my link for that. Just in case you want to support me more, or if you want monthly teaching games, you can look at my Patreon page. So that's something to look at. So thank you all for staying to the end of the live stream, and see you next time. So goodbye.